This image. Can genuine change occur in an environment dominated by optics, or does the performance overshadow the policy? This also leads us to think about the ethical dilemmas leaders face when their strategies affect real people's lives. Decisions around immigration policy, for example, reveal the tension between national interest and human rights. Crafting policies that protect borders while respecting human dignity is a complex balancing act, one that carries profound economic and social implications. The ripple effects are felt in communities and families, in labor markets and cultural landscapes. When economic priorities overshadow ethical considerations, what are the long-term costs to social cohesion and trust? It's fascinating how power, when concentrated, can create a feedback loop that reinforces itself. Access to resources fuels influence, which then opens doors to more resources, creating a cycle that can either build or erode democratic ideals. The ethical questions here are not just abstract. They shape policies that affect wealth distribution, social mobility, and public trust. As individuals, we might ask ourselves, how do we contribute to or challenge these cycles in our own spheres? How do our personal and professional choices reflect broader patterns of power and responsibility? In exploring these themes, history offers plenty of examples where economic ambition clashed with ethical imperatives. Leaders who prioritized short-term economic growth often faced backlash when the social costs became undeniable. Conversely, those who integrated ethics into their economic strategies tended to leave more resilient legacies, albeit sometimes at the expense of immediate popularity or profit. This dynamic mirrors the tension many of us face in daily life. Do we chase quick wins or invest in enduring values that may not yield immediate rewards but build stronger foundations? One practical way to think about this is through the lens of personal leadership. We each hold power in different forms. Over our time, our resources, our communities. The challenge is to use that power not only to advance our own goals, but to uplift others and contribute to a fairer, more sustainable world. When we consider economic decisions, from budgeting to career moves, through this ethical lens, we align strategy with a deeper purpose. This alignment can transform mundane choices into acts of meaningful leadership. I want to encourage you again to subscribe if you haven't already. The journey through these complex ideas isn't always straightforward, but it's one worth taking together. By subscribing, you ensure you won't miss the next conversation, the next insight that might help connect dots in your own thinking. And don't hesitate to share your thoughts below, whether you agree, disagree, or have a unique perspective. This space thrives on your input and helps all of us grow. The exploration of power also leads naturally into the question of legacy. What do we leave behind? For political figures like Trump, legacy is debated fiercely in public arenas. For each of us, legacy might mean something more intimate, the impact on family, friends, or the communities we touch. How do our strategies and decisions shape the narratives others tell about us? Are we mindful of the ethical footprint we leave, or do we act impulsively, driven by immediate desires or external pressures? In economic terms, legacy might relate to how wealth and opportunity are distributed or preserved. Policies and personal choices that promote inclusion and fairness contribute to a healthier social fabric. Conversely, neglecting these values risks deepening divides and fostering resentment. These are not easy considerations. They demand courage to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term gain. But such courage often defines the most meaningful leaders and lives. This brings us full circle to the idea that life, power, and economics are intertwined in complex, sometimes messy ways. The decisions that seem purely strategic often carry ethical weight, while ethical ideals require strategic grounding to be effective. Navigating this interplay is a constant challenge, one that requires self-awareness, empathy, and critical thinking. The story of any leader, public or personal, is ultimately a story of how these forces collide and coexist. Reflecting on these insights, it's clear that staying informed and engaged is crucial. Subscribing here means you're part of a community committed to thoughtful exploration, where ideas meet real-world impact. And as always, your voice matters. Drop a comment to share how you see the balance of power, strategy, and ethics playing out in your own life or in the world around you. Ultimately, understanding the economic and ethical consequences of decisions, whether by powerful leaders or everyday individuals, helps us live with greater intention. It invites us to ask, what kind of power do I want to wield? What legacy do I want to build? These questions don't have easy answers, but wrestling with them shapes not just the arc of history, but the trajectory of our own lives. And maybe that's the most profound thought about life itself. It's a continuous unfolding of choices, each layered with meaning and consequence, inviting us to step into our power with awareness and care. Sometimes, the real weight of a decision only becomes visible long after it's been made. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to focus on the surface benefits, economic gains, political clout, short-term praise, but underneath all that, deeper ripples start to form. Take, for example, the strategic economic decisions made during the Trump administration. Whether one agrees or not with the policies, there's no denying they left a significant footprint, especially in how the world viewed American economic power. Tariffs on China, withdrawal from trade agreements, or corporate tax cuts, they all painted a picture of prioritizing American dominance, but at what cost? And that's the thing about power, it has a way of masking consequence. When you're at the helm, the narrative can be shaped, bent, reframed. But time doesn't lie. Economies adapt, relationships shift, and the ethical undercurrents begin to bubble up. It's not just about numbers on a stock market graph. It's about small businesses that felt the pressure of rising costs, farmers who were promised subsidies as a band-aid for disrupted exports, workers caught between patriotic slogans and empty factories. Economic decisions aren't isolated chess moves. They cascade into real lives. If you're finding this kind of reflection meaningful, this is a great time to hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into ideas that shape how we think, live, and make sense of the world around us. And if you're already thinking about something you'd like to add, drop it in the comments. This channel thrives on your insight too. Now, beyond the numbers and charts, there's another layer that often goes unnoticed: the moral implications of strategy. It's easy to justify actions in the name of growth or national security. But what about the invisible trade-offs? What about the migrant families separated at the border under policies sold as tough on immigration? What about the retraction of environmental regulations in favor of industry profits? Ethics and strategy don't always walk hand in hand. And yet they should. Because how we choose to gain something says just as much, if not more, about us than what we gain. When Trump leaned into the rhetoric of America first, it stirred something, a raw appeal to identity, pride, and control. But layered beneath that slogan was a redefinition of values. Diplomacy became transactional. Alliances that once symbolized shared ideals turned into leverage points. There's a kind of power in treating everything as a deal, but there's also a price. Not everything valuable fits on a balance sheet. Global trust, cultural leadership, long-term stability. These are assets that depreciate when they're overlooked. There's this idea that strategy is cold, calculated, almost robotic. But human decisions are never that clean. They come packed with emotion, history, instinct. Think about the move to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Decades of diplomatic balance upended in a single decision. Supporters called it bold. Critics called it reckless. But either way, it shifted the tone of U.S. foreign policy in the region permanently. That's the thing about choices made at the top. They echo far beyond the moment. And when we talk about power, we often imagine it as something you hold. But real power often lies in perception. During Trump's tenure, one of the most striking shifts was the redefinition of presidential behavior. Tweets became policy, media spectacles became governing tools, and unpredictability was wielded like a weapon. Was it genius? Was it chaos? Depends who you ask. But it undeniably changed the rules. Suddenly, traditional norms didn't matter. Decorum, consistency, nuance, those became optional. In their place, a new kind of brute force authenticity took hold. For better or worse, it resonated with millions. It's fascinating how that kind of power reframes the national conversation. Suddenly, institutions that had been respected for decades, FBI, DOJ, even the press, were labeled as corrupt or fake. Trust became tribal. Information became fragmented. And people stopped agreeing on basic facts. That's not just political turbulence, that's epistemic warfare. And the consequences, still unfolding. If you're still here, that says something. You're someone who values depth over noise. So, again, consider subscribing. These aren't just topics for headlines. They're threads that shape who we are as individuals and as a society. And I'd love to hear how you're interpreting this. What's your take? Drop it in the comments. Every voice adds something. Now, think about the psychological toll of that era. Constant news alerts, shifting narratives, emotional whiplash. People didn't just disagree. They became exhausted. Politics wasn't a background current anymore. It was a storm. And that kind of